welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today with us is Toomas Hendrik Ilves. He is now a professor at the Tartu University where he teaches digitalization, but before he was an Estonian politician who led his country as a foreign minister to the NATO accession. He also served as a president of Estonia 2006 until 2016 and performed a lot to bring his country into the West where it belongs. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You have started your presidential service for the people of Estonia in 2006. And soon after, Estonia faced the first attack, what now we would have called a hybrid attack from Russia, with hacking attacks, with some riots and other uncomfortable developments. What was your first impression? How was it to be the first European victim of such attack?
Well, the first thing was I had no idea what was going on. I mean, it was actually, since I have been working with computers and learned to program when I was 17, so I've been dealing with them since 1971. And so when I couldn't get access to the internet when I was looking at Estonian sites, and then sort of following the logic of what you do, then I could access the Financial Times and the New York Times and Finnish newspapers. So I realized this was something very funny. And then I talked to various IT people, and they said we're experiencing attacks, and they attacked basically media, banks, and everything else. What was not attacked was the already then rather extremely developed digital services system that we have here, which is also at the basis of what Ukraine is doing today. But basically, when your banks don't work, and and you can't read newspapers, well, that's not very good, right? So that was what we had to deal with. And later on, when things had calmed down, I went to see our CERT, or Cyber Computer Emergency Response Team, and they showed me how it proceeded. And basically, because it was not a Gaussian or normal curve of how these rose and fell, but were discrete and would start at a certain time and end at a certain time, I asked, well, what does it work? How does it work? And they said, well, the money ran out. And I said, what does that mean? Well, basically, there are these things called botnets, which are networks of bots, which are computers. At that time, were computers that have been taken out. Nowadays, they're closed-circuit closed-circuit televisions or routers, but in any case, and these are then controlled, basically, at that time, mafia groups, which would then, basically, their main activity was sending out spam, Viagra ads and other things like that. But you can sort of invert the process. So instead of sending everything out like a shotgun, you focus on a server and you overload the server with so many pings that it doesn't work. And that's what we did. That's what they did to us. So that's how it worked. And I mean, the interesting thing about it is that when we went to NATO, we had already been in NATO for 3 years. The West Europeans who couldn't distinguish between a laptop and a toaster oven, because that time no one knew what a cyber attack was. They said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. We knew what we were talking about far better than they. And then one guy even said, oh, you're just being Russophobic.
That was like what you described right now with the attacks, with the level of attack, there were not only the cyber attacks, right?
Well,
It
there
was
were
not
also
only the
FSB or SVR or GRU organized riots in the capital and also in northeast Estonia. In the capital, they caused quite a bit of damage. We have all kinds of evidence of how the organizers of the riots were communicating with embassy staff.
with the Russian embassy staff.
Yes, yes.
So they had like practically their like officers who led the action. But
the third thing was they tried to get Nashi to come to Estonia. Now the problem is that we didn't have to let them into Estonia across the Estonian-Russian border, but so they sent them to Finland. And of course, since Estonia and Finland are in the Schengen area, they could come over without being controlled.
But you said that when you addressed this issue in front to other European nations, then you haven't found like understanding among them. How was it on the daily basis? Like they just denied it your evidences, or they said, please don't exaggerate, don't make Russia angry?
Well, don't exaggerate. You have problems with your Russian minority. I mean, all of the usual stuff that really didn't go away. I just gave a long speech on this. It all changed only on the 24th of February of 2022. Up till then, it really was, you are an inferior country. You are from Eastern Europe. You have problems. Don't tell us what's going on. I mean, that would be sort of a short summary of the attitude toward us. With the exception of the United States and the UK, actually, who actually both the GCHQ and the NSA, I mean, their cyber organizations knew understood exactly what was going on, as opposed to, say, Germany or France, who denied anything. And that was the reaction, and that's what we had to deal with. Not very good, actually. I would say that that was a general attitude that we trust the Russians more than we trust you.
And you said that everything was changed on 24th February 22, but obviously not everything. As we observe now, the Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian politics, like internal politics, have still been criticized in the West. Like, what is the current stand of this? Like, being on one side, being in front line, having common land border with Russia, on another side, being forced practically like to give up a lot of weapons to Ukraine because other nations don't do it.
Well, I mean, most recently, I mean, that was, when the European Union adopted this, made the decision that not to allow Russian license plate cars into the EU. Of course, who does that affect? That affects the countries with a border. So that's really only Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. And so while it was an EU decision, then of course oddly enough, the Russian opposition decided to focus on Estonia. And even yesterday, you know, the shills of the Russian government, like Kenneth Rexroth, or Rothrock, not Rexroth, he was a poet, but Kevin Rothrock started making fun of the Estonians when we were only implementing an EU regulation. But we're the smallest, so it's fun to make fun of us, of course. I found it very bizarre that it was the Russian so-called liberal opposition that attacked us. Again, they could have attacked all of the Baltic countries, but or all of the countries did this, but for some reason it was Estonia that was attacked on social media. I mean, it's just kind of typical. We're used to it. All it does is it lessens our respect for the people who claim to be opposition.
That is exactly what your country are facing, not only Estonia. We know that Riga, Latvia, is one of the strongholds for the Russian opposition and for Russian oppositional media. And they had all the time these tensions with the country which hosted them, up to the Russian TV channel Dost having moved from Latvia to the Netherlands. And they were like all the time like this tension, like you need to accept us, or should be like follow like certain rules which we don't think are good enough. What is the problem here?
I really have no idea. Aside from, I would argue that it's kind of an imperial mindset that it seems to extend into the so-called liberal opposition. I remember there was a time when, after the invasion, the big one. I mean, this hatred of the Baltic states is like bizarre. I remember there's a guy named Leonid Rogozin who tweeted this thing. When we take, to the effect, I don't have the exact quote right now, but it was, when we win and take over, we will, unlike Putin, build an efficient army. And so the Baltic states better watch out. Well, that sounds pretty imperialistic to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it like an imperialistic mindset, or because for many in Germany, there is no such problem with the Russian liberal opposition as long as they are against Putin, because Putin is being seen as the primary threat.
Yeah, well, look, when I say, there's not an imperial mindset toward Germany, because Germany did not belong to Russia, and so they're not tuned into this mindset. We are, of course. It's bizarre. Also what's fairly typical is that Ms. Pevkich lives in Lithuania. We had this common policy in those 5 countries of not allowing, of all EU policy, but practiced by 5 border states, of not allowing in countries with license plates. This is, again, EU policy, all 27 countries. And but for some reason, it was Estonia that was picked out. We all did this. But living in Vilnius, where she lives, she didn't say anything about Lithuania. So I guess it's the old adage: if you want to kick a dog, make sure you kick a small dog. Okay.
So that is the explanation. You think is right. But if we speak about like what has changed now, do you believe that the position and the expertise of the Baltic states is enjoying more attention within the EU and the NATO?
Maybe a little bit, but not for. For one, we do just have one of the better intelligence agencies compared to countries that are much larger, both foreign intelligence and counterintelligence. I think until recently, we had actually caught more spies in little Estonia than in Germany. It's pretty funny, if you ask me, but anyway. And in terms of foreign intelligence, what we do is taken extremely seriously by the Brits and the Americans, because we've been right, as opposed to, say, when the Americans last year, before the 24th, were saying, the Americans were saying that they're going to invade, and the French and the Germans and were saying, no, they're exaggerating, which led to the head of BND, the German Foreign Intelligence Agency, Bruno Kahl, having to be evacuated and exfiltrated from Ukraine on the 24th of February because he was there because he didn't believe the Americans, and they had to send in their special operations forces to extract him from Ukraine. I mean, that I guess is the most extreme case. I mean, basically, there's this wishful thinking that we don't really want to believe that they do something like that. I mean, even to the point of last September. I mean, so a year ago, but this was already 6 months after Bucha. Macron was still calling us warmongers in the East.
Yeah. And that was the lack of understanding which was present in the West. But regarding that, I think it's very interesting and important what you've mentioned with the quality of Estonian counterintelligence operations and like finding out like the Russian sabotage actions. What is the Estonian approach to that? Like, why are your secret services so effective against the Russian spy?
Well, the external one, because of signal intelligence, we are just good in IT. So that's one thing. On domestic intelligence, it's hard to say. I mean, I think it's not that we're good. I think that others are bad. Basically, they're inadequate. I mean, for example, the country of Austria does not belong to or is excluded from something known as the Club of Bern, which you can look up on Wikipedia too, which is the organization of European counterintelligence agencies. It does not, Austria does not belong to it or is excluded from it because they do not do any counterintelligence against those spies who are not directly spying on Austria. Now, of course, Vienna is the home of all kinds of international organizations, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the OSCE, and I mean, which are clearly of interest to Russian spies, probably other spies as well, but the Austrians don't even look at those.
So as long as you are in Vienna as a Russian or, I don't know, Chinese spy, and you spy on the Americans or on Germans or on French, you have no problems with the Austrian counterintelligence.
Right. And so, I mean, this is an issue. Now, in the case of Germany, one former employee of the Verfassungsschutz actually said to me, well, in the when Schröder came, we were advised not to pay too much attention. Well, I don't know what that means. That's one person saying it, but in general, that's kind of the understanding that people have.
But when we talk about the future of Europe, Europe will not be over like after this war, and the threats will not get away after this war. How can we, and what should we do to improve our security situation? Like, what reforms should be done? Is NATO enough to protect us? Is the EU enough to ensure our economic and democratic stability?
Well, I don't know what else there is, but it's not. I mean, let's face it. There will, after the war ends, there will be a very strong push by the bigger countries to go back to the status quo ante, to take away sanctions, to restore economic ties. And while we may have gotten a moral leg up after the 24th of February, because we were, in fact, right, I see that it will be temporary. I don't see a fundamental. I think there will be a very strong desire on the part of the big countries to go back to business as usual.
What can countries
and
like?
Of course, what makes it even worse is that, I mean, if Donald Trump is elected in the United States, given what he has said and promised, first of all, I mean, he has promised to pull out of NATO, which is not good, and also to solve the problem by talking to Putin, which is not very good either. So I think that NATO is actually facing some serious problems. We will then see, I imagine, France stepping in by saying, well, we're the sole nuclear power in Europe. Now we will take over security of Europe. And of course, then we will be dependent upon France's understanding of Russia, which probably has not been great after Marquis de Coustine's book from 1838.
But
that was a very good book. But
yeah, that was a book which Russians also love to quote, like to demonstrate how Russophobic the West should have been. Maybe one of the most quoted foreign books on Russia in Russia.
It wasn't very nice about them.
Well, he didn't need to, but we certainly know that the Russian former Minister of Culture, Medinsky, clearly loved to address this book, and I think like he tried to influence also Vladimir Putin, presenting him these quotes, etc. But back to the future of security in Europe. As long as you say, the some countries with a lot of influence and economic and military potential could try to return to status quo. Should the other countries which share the common border with Russia, should they try to create some alliance here, which can be maybe more active in protecting their security interests? Is it possible?
Well, I think some kind of, I mean, let's put it this way. There is a common understanding among the Baltic countries, Poland, Czechia, and the Nordic countries, more or less. I think that's kind of an area that understands.
It doesn't mean that they can forge, like we have already seen attempts to create this Three Seas initiative or
well, yeah, but that's more economic. I don't see anything really. Well, it will depend on what happens after the war. I don't see it. I don't want to have any illusions.
Will the economic ties between the regions lead to more like integration of Ukraine into the EU? Like, and can like some countries like Poland, which are now one of the best allies of Ukraine, can they continue to be allies of Ukraine after the war?
Well, I mean, this has much more to do with the European Union than anything military. Insofar as the European Union is every member is really out for their own economic interests. We already see this with the grain issue right now with Poland and Ukraine, and Slovakia and Ukraine, that and Hungary. I mean, it's well, let's put it this way. I think it'll be. I mean, all of Europe is very concerned about what will be the nature of the common agricultural policy and the structural funds after enlargement, as it was 25 years ago. But now the income differential between, say, Ukraine, Moldova, and the rest of the Union is much stronger than before. And Ukraine is a real agricultural powerhouse, and that is seen as a threat by countries for which agriculture is a political and economic, of high political and economic importance. So there where you have a higher level of GDP from agriculture, and where therefore farmers have a much bigger political impact on discussions, there I imagine there will be quite a few issues to resolve.
What is the future of Estonia's security after this war? Estonia is already a country with huge investment in its security sector. Will it increase? Will it be more NATO troops on Estonian borders? Will it be like, or is it easy
I'm
now?
hoping that Ukraine will help come defend us.
Well, I think that bilateral relations will exist, of course. But what is the security on the Baltic Sea with Finland inside of NATO? Actually, the Baltic states have much better protection within the alliance, but the Russian danger will never disappear.
Well, I mean, if Turkey and Hungary stop blocking Sweden's accession to NATO, the entire Baltic Sea, with the exception of this little pimple known as Kaliningrad and the end of the Gulf of Finland with Petersburg, the rest of it will be a new Mare Nostrum for NATO and the European Union. I mean, just the way that for Rome, the Mediterranean was Mare Nostrum, so too the Baltic Sea will be more or less Mare Nostrum. And we can also say Carthago delenda est. But anyway, I mean, from the Baltic Sea, I mean, the Baltic states have not been this secure forever. Ever. Never have they been this secure, except for maybe before 1709, when at least Estonia and Finland were part of the Swedish Empire. But unfortunately, Karl XII had to go ruin that and go lose the Battle of Poltava. And after that, it's been all downhill until now.
So now we have practically the first real chance for revival of security in the Baltic region.
Well, it's coming along slowly. I mean, there is a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of integration to be done. So we'll see. I mean, it's not been a very long time. It's, I mean, Finland has only been in NATO since this spring, so we have to see how it develops.
That's true. Well, we have like a lot of challenges we're facing currently with the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, with the Russian attempts to undermine the security on the European continent with hybrid attacks, political attacks, and other things. We know that Russia funds radical parties in many European countries. Have they tried to do something in Estonia besides these unfortunate events in 2008 when they tried to trigger riots? 2007. I'm sorry. Have they tried to find some radical?
We have been facing all kinds of various hybrid attempts all along. I wouldn't say anything is increased. If anything, I think the attention toward Estonia and the Baltic countries has decreased. I mean, we used to have the Zapad exercises every other year, you know, basically, which were exercises to practice invading us. Well, it was supposed to happen this year, but for some strange reason, they didn't. We'll see. I mean, we are in a new security environment in the past year. It's too early to predict. We are working on seeing what the various options are, where we can integrate further. Certainly the push is toward greater integration on the part of the whole region. And the political will around the Baltic Sea, at least in the case of Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and Finland, and Sweden and Denmark is certainly there. It remains to be seen how much Germany is going to be involved. I mean, just as a reminder, until the invasion of Georgia, Germany was blocking even creating defense plans for the Baltic states. Every other country in NATO had plans for what happens if it is invaded or there's some kind of attack. Germany blocked it for the Baltic countries.
How was it possible?
How is it possible? They veto it. You need unanimity in NATO.
So they actively vetoed common defense plans for the Baltic Sea?
Yes.
Was it under the Schröder or Merkel, or?
It was even, well, it was both.
Can you explain it? Why?
Well, I mean, there is attitude towards what we were and attitudes toward Russia. I don't know.
Like, didn't they want, like, they didn't want to provoke Russia with some plans, or they didn't want to have more influence of the Baltic Sea?
I mean, I really don't know. I don't know what it is. I mean, I only know the facts. And the facts were we did not have defense plans. And we heard then it was Germany was vetoing it.
Well, we all hope that now, like after the defeat in Ukraine, Russia will not be able to launch another attack on any other nation, and that is of course
for several years. But that is a temporary matter.
How can
our
Russia
military intelligence says they could be back up within 4 years after the war, whenever that war ends?
How can this danger be downed forever, like, or for a longer time than 4 years?
Mm. Well, that would require a completely different Russia.
Is it possible?
I have no idea.
Is Russia like a complete Russia with change from within, or a complete Russia with something enforced on Russia from the outside?
But nothing could be really pushed, and I don't think the larger Western European countries would allow anything to last for too long. But basically, if you have a 500-year tradition that goes back to Ivan the Terrible of expansion through military conquest, it's a hard tradition. It's a hard cultural mindset to change. You know, I just watched yesterday, I saw a video of Russian ballet dancers practicing a dance with Kalashnikovs. I mean, no country in the West would ever have dances with ballerinas doing elegant, whatever moves you want to call there, practicing shooting people. I mean, that's just, it's a different cultural mindset. I mean, I couldn't imagine Estonian ballet, an American ballet. I mean, I just could not imagine it, but it's there, and it's, well, so there is this kind of bellicosity that seems to be part of this, and it's glorification of the military that is alien to us and alien to Western liberal democracy. And it is alien because generally militaristic cultures don't really survive too much in liberal democracies. You have to have an authoritarian regime in order to have mass support for militarism, as we saw in the case of Japan and Germany, both before, during Bismarck and later on through World War II, is military, and we see it in North Korea and in China. And the reason is simple. It's also why NATO membership requires democracy. Is that generally people don't like to go off to war, and they don't vote for people who go to war, and it's really it's only really authoritarian regimes that are so interested in having military conquest. I'm not very optimistic, in other words.
Well, that is a challenging perspective, and of course we need to have it in mind that the danger will not disappear, and we need to trust those who know the problem and who are on the front line of facing this problem, like Estonia was and is since years. It was Toomas Hendrik Ilves, president of Estonia from 2006 until 2016. And we have discussed on the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast the challenges we're facing now, the experience of Estonia with dealing with the Russian threat, and how can we go united in front of this danger. Thank you so much for this interview, Mr. President.